I woke up this morning and saw someone staring at me through my bedroom window. The strange thing wasn't that they were standing there. It was that I recognized their face. It was mine. Let that sink in for a moment. Imagine waking up to your own reflection, except it's not in a mirror. It's out there, beyond the glass, watching you with an expression you've never seen on your own face before, cold, detached, predatory. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished into the foggy morning air. That's how it started. At first, I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, a trick of light or shadow. But deep down, I knew something about that encounter felt wrong. Not just because it looked like me, but because when our eyes met, I felt a jolt, a sharp, electric sensation that made every hair on my body stand on end. Have you ever had that feeling? That split second where reality seems to shift just slightly, and you can't quite explain why. It happened again 3 days later. This time, I was leaving work late. As I walked to my car, I noticed a figure leaning against the hood, arms crossed, head tilted slightly to one side. At first glance, I thought it was a collie playing some kind of prank. But as I got closer, I froze. Same face, same clothes, even the same watch I'd been wearing all day. Except his posture, it wasn't relaxed. It was deliberate, almost mocking. When he smiled, I swear my heart stopped. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. He held it up so I could see it clearly. It was a picture of me sleeping, in my bed, last night. I don't remember driving home after that. All I know is that I bolted straight to my apartment, locked every door and window, and spent the next hour pacing back and forth trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was I losing my mind? Or was someone, or something, deliberately messing with me? The next morning, I decided to investigate. If this whatever it was wanted to play games, fine. I'd play along, but I needed answers. So I went online and started digging. Hours turned into days as I scoured forums, Reddit threads, anything that might shed light on what I'd experienced. Most of it was nonsense, ghost stories, alien abductions, conspiracy theories, but then I stumbled across something that sent chills down my spine. A term I'd never heard before, Skinwalker. Now, I'm sure you've heard urban legends about shapeshifters, creatures that can take on human forms. But according to Native American folklore, Skinwalkers aren't just random monsters. They're people who've willingly sold their souls to gain unnatural powers. They can mimic anyone they choose, even those closest to you. And once they've chosen a target, they don't stop until they've driven them completely insane, or worse. But here's the part that really stuck with me. Skinwalkers don't just steal appearances. They steal lives. Bit by bit, piece by piece, they erase everything that makes you you. Your memories, your relationships, until one day, you wake up and realize you're no longer the person you thought you were. By now, you're probably wondering if I believe any of this. Honestly, I didn't at first. I mean, come on, it sounds ridiculous, right? But then strange things started happening around me. Little things at first. My coffee mug would be missing from the kitchen counter, only to reappear hours later in places I'd already checked. Keys would move without explanation. Once, I found my phone plugged into a charger in a room I hadn't entered all day. And then there were the dreams. Vivid, terrifying dreams where I'd find myself standing outside my own house, looking in through the windows, watching myself go about my daily routine as if nothing was wrong. Only, the version of me inside the house didn't seem quite real. Its movements were too smooth, too perfect, like it was performing a role instead of living a life. One night, I woke up screaming. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed under an invisible weight. And then I saw him, standing in the corner of my bedroom, staring at me with those hollow, soulless eyes. Same face, same clothes, same watch. But this time he spoke. "You shouldn't have looked," he whispered. His voice sounded like mine, but distorted, as if multiple versions of me were speaking at once. "You will regret it." Before I could respond, he lunged at me. Instinctively, I threw my arm up to shield myself, but instead of hitting flesh, my hand passed right through him. The room filled with a deafening roar, like static electricity amplified 1,000 times over. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. But something was different. Subtle, yet unmistakable. The air smelled faintly of burnt hair. My bedside lamp flickered erratically, even though the bulb was brand new. And lying on my pillow was another photograph. This one showed me sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen. The timestamp read, "Yesterday." The photograph shook in my hands as I stared at it, trying to process what I was seeing. It wasn't just the fact that it depicted me yesterday. It was how still I looked. My posture was rigid, unnatural, like someone had posed a mannequin in my chair. And my eyes, they weren't mine. They were empty, lifeless, staring straight ahead without blinking. That's when it hit me. What if the person in the photo wasn't me? What if, at some point during the day, something or someone had taken my place? The thought sent a cold wave of dread coursing through me. How could I even prove I was still me? Memories started to feel unreliable, slippery. Was I remembering things correctly, or were fragments being rewritten while I slept? Desperate for answers, I called my best friend, Sarah. She'd known me since childhood. If anyone could confirm my identity, it was her. But when she picked up the phone, her voice sounded off. Flat, distant. "Hey," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my tone. "Can we meet up? There's something weird going on, and I need your help." There was a long pause before she replied. "Sure. Coffee shop downtown." Relief flooded through me. At least she hadn't questioned why I needed her so urgently. Maybe this was all in my head after all. "Yeah, perfect. See you in 20 minutes. "Okay." Her response was clipped, almost mechanical. Before I could say anything else, she hung up. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, clutching the photograph tightly in my hand. The walk to the cafe felt surreal, like moving through molasses. Every step seemed heavier than the last, and the world around me took on an eerie stillness. Cars passed silently, their engines muted. Pedestrians avoided eye contact, gliding past me like ghosts. When I arrived, Sarah was already seated at a corner table, sipping a latte. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed her hands. They were trembling ever so slightly. In her eyes, they darted around the room, never settling on me for more than a second. "You okay?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, fine. Just tired." I hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. Finally, I blurted out, "Do you trust me?" Her fork clattered against the plate. "What kind of question is that?" "A serious one," I said, leaning closer. "If something happened, if you thought maybe I wasn't entirely myself anymore, would you notice?" Sarah frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I think," I swallowed hard, lowering my voice. "Something's following me, mimicking me, replacing me." For a split second, her expression softened, and I saw a flicker of concern. But then her face hardened again, and she leaned back in her chair. "You're scaring me," she said flatly. "Maybe you should talk to someone about this. A therapist, maybe." My stomach dropped. This wasn't the reaction I'd hoped for. "You don't believe me." "It's not that," she said, avoiding my gaze. "It's just, look, I have to go. We'll talk later, okay?" Before I could protest, she stood up and walked away, leaving her half-finished coffee behind. As I watched her leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. Not with her, but with me. By the time I got home, paranoia had fully set in. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Shadows loomed larger than they should have. Even the sound of my own breathing felt foreign, distorted. I locked every door and window, double-checking each one multiple times. Then I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark, clutching a baseball bat. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. I lost track. Time itself felt unstable, stretching and contracting unpredictably. And then I heard it, a faint scratching noise coming from the living room. Slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragging across wood. I froze, gripping the bat tighter. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure whoever, or whatever, was out there could hear it. The scratching grew louder, closer. Each scrape echoed through the silence, punctuated by the occasional soft thud. Whatever it was inside the apartment. Without thinking, I bolted for the hallway closet and hid, pulling the door shut behind me. Through the crack between the hinges, I could see the dim outline of the living room. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. And then I saw him, standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. Same face, same clothes, same watch. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood another figure, a woman. Her features were blurred, indistinct, but her body language mirrored his perfectly. Together, they moved toward the couch, where I'd left the photograph earlier. He picked it up, examined it briefly, and then turned to face the closet. "You can't hide forever," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "We're always watching." Panic surged through me. I swung the closet door open and charged at them, swinging the bat wildly. But instead of hitting flesh, I collided with thin air. The room spun, and suddenly I was no longer in my apartment. I was standing in a forest. The trees twisted upward unnaturally, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and decay. In the distance, I could hear whispers, hundreds of voices overlapping, speaking in languages I didn't understand. And then I saw them. Dozens of figures emerging from the shadows, each one identical to me. Some wore expressions of anger, others sadness, but all of them shared the same hollow gaze. They surrounded me, closing in slowly, until I could feel their breath on my skin. One stepped forward, holding out a mirror. When I looked into it, I didn't see my reflection. Instead, I saw the faces of everyone I'd ever known. My parents, my friends, Sarah, all staring back at me with accusing eyes. "This is your fault," they whispered in unison. "You let us in." I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. My clock read 3:03 a.m. Everything felt eerily quiet, too quiet. I stumbled to the bathroom to splash water on my face, desperate to ground myself in reality. But when I looked in the mirror, I froze. There, reflected behind me, was the same man who'd been haunting me. Only this time, he wasn't smiling. He was crying. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice trembling. His lips moved, but the words didn't match. Instead, my own voice echoed in my head. "You already know." And then the mirror cracked. The crack in the mirror spread like lightning, fracturing the glass into a spiderweb of jagged lines. I stumbled backward, my breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. The figure behind me didn't move. It just stood there, frozen, its tears now streaming down its face like rivers of liquid silver. And then, without warning, the mirror shattered completely, sending shards of glass cascading to the floor. But when the dust settled, I realized something impossible. The reflection wasn't gone. It was still there, hovering in midair, suspended like a ghostly imprint on the air itself. Its expression shifted from sorrow to rage, and it lunged forward, reaching out as if trying to grab me through the void. I bolted out of the bathroom, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run as far away from this apartment as possible. But where would I go? If what I'd read about Skinwalkers was true, they didn't just haunt places. They haunted people. No matter where I went, it would follow. That's when I noticed the photographs scattered across my living room floor. Dozens of them, each one depicting me in various moments over the past few weeks. Sleeping, eating, walking to work. But these weren't ordinary photos. They were Polaroids, the kind that develop instantly after being taken. And every single one had a message scrawled on the white border in shaky handwriting. "You're not real. They'll forget you. It's already too late." The final photo stopped me cold. It showed me standing in front of my bedroom mirror, staring at my own reflection. Except, the reflection wasn't looking at me. It was looking directly at the camera, its lips curled into a sinister smile. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor, clutching the photo like it might burn me. Was this really happening? Or was I losing my grip on reality? The line between the two felt thinner than ever, like walking a tightrope over an endless abyss. And then I heard it, a voice soft and familiar, coming from somewhere nearby. Sarah's voice. "I try to warn you." I whipped around, searching for her, but the room was empty. "Sarah," I called out, my voice trembling. "Where are you?" There was no response, just silence. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was here, watching me, listening. "Please," I begged, clutching the photo tighter. "Tell me what's going on." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air seemed to ripple, like heat rising off asphalt on a summer day. Slowly, Sarah materialized in front of me, not as herself, but as a projection, flickering like an old film reel. Her image was distorted, her features blurred, but her eyes were sharp and clear, piercing through me with an intensity that made my chest ache. "You let him in," she said, her voice hollow and distant. "You opened the door. What are you talking about?" I demanded, scrambling to my feet. "I didn't invite anyone." She shook her head sadly. "Not intentionally, but you doubted yourself. You questioned your own reality. That's all it takes." The pieces started falling into place, clicking together like puzzle fragments in my mind. All those little things, the misplaced objects, the strange dreams, the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. Something had been feeding off my uncertainty, exploiting my fears until it could slip into my life unnoticed. But why me? I asked, my voice breaking. What did I do to deserve this? "It doesn't work like that," Sarah replied, her form flickering more violently now. "He doesn't choose based on guilt or innocence. He chooses based on opportunity, vulnerability. You left yourself open, and he took advantage." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought back to everything I'd experienced over the past few weeks. The isolation, the sleepless nights, the creeping sense of unease, and realized how obvious it must have been to him. To them, whatever they were. Before I could respond, Sarah's image began to fade, dissolving into static before vanishing entirely. I was alone again, surrounded by the eerie silence of my apartment. But the weight of her words lingered, pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time still felt unreliable, but eventually, exhaustion forced me to lie down. My body felt heavy, impossibly so, as if gravity itself had intensified. As I drifted toward unconsciousness, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying Sarah's warning over and over in my head. "You let him in." The phrase echoed in my mind, growing louder and louder until it drowned out every other thought. And then, just as I was about to succumb to sleep, I heard it. A knock at the door. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, louder this time. 3 deliberate raps, followed by silence. My heart clenched in my chest, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. He already knew I was here. Summoning every ounce of courage I'd left, I grabbed the baseball bat and crept toward the door. Each step felt like wading through quicksand, slow and labored. When I finally reached the peephole, I hesitated, afraid of what I might see. Then I looked. Standing on the other side of the door was me. Same face, same clothes, same watch. But his expression was different this time. Gone was the cold detachment, replaced by something far worse. Pity. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to do anything but stand there paralyzed. But before I could react, he spoke, his voice muffled but unmistakable. "It's time," he said softly. "You've served your purpose." And then the world went black. When I woke up, I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen. The timestamp on the photograph lying next to me read, "Today." The question is, am I still me? Or am I just another copy?